Hey guys, Michael Gallacher, the Media Preacher, back again for another movie review. Today I wanted to try and do a top 5 type review. I was trying to think of topics to do a top 5 review on, and an obvious topic that I thought I need to do but haven't yet done is top 5 sequels that I found were the most disappointing but eagerly anticipated sequels I was dying to see. And in compiling the top 5, it's actually quite hard to narrow them down. There are some notable exceptions that I'll come to at the end of the review, but I think I've put together the top 5 sequels of the film, of an original film that I absolutely loved, was then dying to see the sequel for, and when I saw the sequel, I thought that was terrible. But worse than being terrible, a really, really bad sequel, I think, can take away from how good the original film was. And so starting with number 5 on my list, surprisingly this title is from Steven Spielberg. And Steven Spielberg has created some of my favourite films in the canon of film history. And one of my favourite films that he created was Jurassic Park. I remember going to see it at the cinema 2 or 3 times with friends, with my dad, absolutely loving the film beyond anything. I remember being so excited when it was released on home video because there was a long delay, or it felt anyway like there was a long delay between its theatrical release and its release on video. But in the mid 90s, I think 96 or 97, I saw the trailer for The Lost World at the cinema. I thought, my great, directed by Steven Spielberg, it's going to be fantastic. And I always thought, wow, I just can't wait to see the second Jurassic Park. And of course, in the mid-90s, we were given The Lost World. And I went to the cinema so excited. The book, it was written by Michael Crichton. It was directed by Steven Spielberg. John Williams did the music. It should have been absolutely fantastic. But for me, it completely missed the mark. I tried to enjoy it over the years. I was disappointed when I saw it at the cinema. I immediately got it when it came out on video. I owned it on Laserdisc. I never bought the DVD of it, which speaks volumes, and I now do have the Blu-ray of it. And I still just don't think it's a particularly well-made sequel. There are some good set pieces in it, as always with Steven Spielberg films, but the plot I just thought was absolutely terrible. You see, I always had it in my head, having seen the first Jurassic Park, that when the character who's taking the items away, stealing the items from the park to sell to the other company, I thought, well, hold on a second, he had samples that he'd stored in that sort of shaving foam canister, and nothing ever happened to the shaving foam canister. It rolls down the hill. And I thought the sequel would be built on that. And of course it wasn't. The sequel was built on the basis that there was actually a second park that had been created, and everyone goes to the second park and the same thing essentially happens again, but it doesn't happen as well. Jeff Goldblum returns but doesn't add a massive amount to the film. And I always felt that the characterizations in that film were massively, massively lacking. I didn't feel anything for any of the characters, whether it be Jeff Goldblum's stepdaughter, or the Julianne Moore character, or the Pete Postlethwaite character. Huge names at the time that were associated with the project, who should have brought so much gravitas and weight to it. But to me, the whole thing just left me very cold. And it was a film I wanted to enjoy, but I think, I had to admit, didn't really realise my expectations. And I didn't watch the Jurassic Park, the original, for quite a long time afterwards because I felt it really took away from the original movie. And I like to think of the original movie as being a standalone piece, and then really all of the sequels that have followed it I see as being perhaps in the same canon but not really associated to that first film. That said, I did enjoy Jurassic World. I know a lot of people didn't like it, but I thought it was actually the first really good sequel to Jurassic Park that we've been given. So that was my number 5. My number 4 was a film that I discovered again on Sky Television, I think in the mid-90s. I saw The French Connection, and I thought it was a brilliant film. It was obviously a film from the 70s, had Gene Hackman in it, I've got a copy on a DVD here. And when I bought the DVD, after seeing it on television, I also had The French Connection too. And it starts well, but for me, it just didn't keep me in the same way that the first film kept me. Part of what I liked about the first film was the whole New York vibe it had, and certainly New York in the 70s. The second film, he ends up being addicted to drugs, the Gene Hackman character. He ends up trying to chase this drug dealer who's escaped from the first film. He ends up in France. It's just very long, very dull, and it's a film that I was surprised that Gene Hackman was so attached to. It has a completely different feel, and for me, it took away from the uniqueness of The French Connection. So that's my number 4 anyway, The French Connection. My number 3 film is a film that I didn't see again at the cinema because I was too young. But the original film starred Arnold Schwarzenegger. It was directed by John McTiernan. It is a fantastic classic action movie from the 80s, Predator. And I saw Predator on video probably in the very early 90s for the first time, and I really, really thought it was a solid film. And even as a young teenager, I could see that it was a quality film that had been made. It wasn't just a throwaway Chuck Norris type action picture. This was a film that I thought would stand the test of time, and I think it has. And Predator is actually being re-released in UK theatres, I think before the end of the year. It's fairly limited screenings of it, but it's coming back to UK cinemas. I then went to the video shop, and I was really excited to get Predator 2. I was so disappointed by it. I have both movies now on Blu-ray as part of my Predator trilogy collection. And I revisited Predator 2 probably about a year ago. I think it's sometime this year, actually, perhaps not that long ago. And I still don't like the film. I thought perhaps the younger version of me didn't appreciate the fact it had a different tone to the first film. But it just, to me, it just doesn't resonate at all. It's got a completely different tone than the first film. It has a story that, of course, is tied into the first film, but I didn't feel it was tied in any meaningful way. Danny Glover is the lead in the second film, and so it's already taking a hugely different direction because it hasn't got Arnold Schwarzenegger in the movie, except I think there's a very small shot of him. And I just thought the story was very long. I thought it was badly directed. It comes across, and this was my view of it this year when I watched it, as kind of a bad B-movie that perhaps Channel 5 would show in the UK. And I have nothing good to say about Predator 2 at all. I didn't enjoy it, and I don't think I'll be watching the Blu-ray again. But of course I will be watching the original film. But I did feel that Predator 2 really took away from the magic of that first film. Now, number 2 on my list is a film that is a comedy. And it stars Jim Carrey. And his breakthrough film was Ace Ventura. I didn't see Ace Ventura at the cinema because I didn't think it looked very good. But when I watched it on video when it was released, I thought it was an absolutely brilliant film. It made me smile so much. It was well paced. It had lots of gags that really hit the mark, some that don't. It's not a perfect film, but I thought it was a good, solid film. And so when Ace Ventura 2, When Nature Calls came out, I was pretty much first in line to go and view that at the cinema. And for me, I don't know what happened, but just the whole movie was not funny. And Jim Carrey was doing the same character, but without any particularly good gags. And so I have Ace Ventura on DVD. I've never upgraded it to Blu-ray. It's not a film I watch very much anymore. I did see it, I think, last year at some point, and I felt it looked quite dated. But I really felt that sequel to this film took away from Ace Ventura so much. I own the DVD. I had it on videotape, obviously, but I've never owned the sequel. I saw it at the cinema, and I think I saw it on rental video when it came out, but it's not something that I would even be looking to pick up at a car boot and DVD. If I saw it for 50p, I would leave it because I didn't find it funny when I was 15. I'm not going to find it funny now I'm in my 30s. The last movie that I'd like to refer to in this video is an absolute classic movie of the 80s. I have a great edition of it on DVD. I have the Criterion edition of it on DVD. I had it on video cassette. I have the latest edition of it on Blu-ray, which has an absolutely phenomenal transfer, and the original film, I would say, stands today as being an absolutely fantastic film. But the sequel was horrible, and that film, of course, was directed by Paul Verhoeven. It starred Peter Weller, and it's one of the best action social commentary type movies of the 1980s. It is, of course, Robocop. The original Robocop is full of satire. It's violent beyond anything. As a 10-year-old, you enjoy it on one level. As a 30-year-old, you enjoy it on a completely different level. But it works to different audiences. It's an unforgiving film, and it's a film that really is making a social commentary, and it really has something to say. As a 10-year-old, I was so excited to see Robocop 2. Of course, far too young to see either of the movies at the cinema, but I remember asking for Christmas for Robocop 2 on videotape and absolutely dying to watch it. I remember to this day putting the VHS into the player, pressing play, and being devastated by just the mess that film was. And I knew that the film was rubbish, even as a 10-year-old. I mean, you don't expect to recreate a film like Robocop because it's so unique. It was funny, but horrendously violent. As I say, it makes a social commentary. It's not something that you can recreate. It's not something that you should try to recreate. But as a 10-year-old, I thought I might at least enjoy the sequel because you've got Robocop running around shooting bad guys. I remember you had this horrendous story about this little kid who's a drug dealer and is supposed to be like the big kingpin boss. And as a 10-year-old, that didn't ring true. As an adult, that doesn't ring true. I felt that Robocop 2 should never have been made. It should have been left alone. It's a standalone film, and it's a film that I felt took away, again, massively from the quality of the original film. And again, I own Robocop a number of times on different formats. I do not own a copy of Robocop 2. I have stayed away from any of the trilogy releases that have been produced for sale. I won't touch them because I think that the original movie should stand on its own, and it's a movie of such superior quality. You should not, well, I don't personally want to watch Robocop 2, Robocop 3. The remake is okay for what it is, but it doesn't have the magic of the original film. So they are my top 5 most disappointing sequels, and sequels that actually I think take away from the quality of the original films. Other notable exceptions, a lot of them are from the 80s, I was thinking. The Karate Kid Part 2 is not a particularly good sequel. I have the Karate Kid up here somewhere. I also have the Karate Kid Part 3, but I don't own Part 2 on DVD. A film that wasn't a sequel, but is a massively disappointing addition to a franchise, would have to be something like A Good Day to Die Hard. That last Die Hard movie that Bruce Willis did was so bad. I do own it on Blu-ray, for completist sake only. I haven't actually brought myself to watch the Blu-ray again since I originally viewed it. One day I will, but as I remember rightly, it was boring. And Bruce Willis, to me, looks like he's just in it for the paycheck. So anyway, they are my top 5 most disappointing sequels. Let's start a conversation about this. I want to know what your most disappointing sequels are. Please leave me comments below on the video, and I look forward to hearing from you. So from now, that's me, Michael Gallacher, the Media Preacher, signing out.